My brother told everyone I died so I'd miss my dad's birthday. He made a fake memorial slideshow and said I ruined the vibe. I showed up mid-speech and dropped my bag. The cake hit the floor before I even spoke. When I walked into that restaurant, everyone froze like they were staring at a ghost, which technically they thought they were. My mom's hand flew to her mouth, the cake knife clattered to the floor, and my dad, whose birthday this was supposed to be, just whispered, "Oh my God." Right in front of him was a big projector screen, looping a slideshow with my face on it. Pictures from high school, my graduation, even my dog's old photo, all under some soft music and the words, "In loving memory of Tyler James, 1993 to 2025. Yeah. According to my brother, I was dead. The cake hit the floor before I even said a word. I still had my duffel bag on my shoulder, covered in dirt from the trip, and I just stood there, trying to process what the hell I was looking at. My dad's eyes were watering. My mom was trembling. And my brother, Mark, was standing by the mic, frozen mid-speech, like he'd seen a ghost. I guess technically he had. He stammered out something like, "Tyler, how are you?" And I just said, "Alive." Apparently that's news around here. The room was silent, just stunned faces. Then chaos. People crying, others whispering. One of my cousins even screamed. I didn't know whether to laugh or start throwing punches. It was supposed to be Dad's 60th birthday. I'd been gone a few months for work, off-grid, up in Alaska where I didn't have signal. When I finally came back, I texted the family group chat. No response. Then I checked my social media and saw memorial posts. People writing "Rest easy, brother," and "Fly high, Tyler." I thought it was some cruel joke at first, until I saw who posted first. Mark. He even changed my Facebook profile picture to a black and white photo. Now here he was, holding a microphone, surrounded by photos of me and fake candles. I dropped my duffel bag on the floor. The sound made everyone jump. "Go on," I said. "Finish your speech." He didn't. He looked pale, guilty, like someone caught mid-heist. Dad turned to him slowly. "Mark, what is this?" And Mark, the golden boy, the one who always handled things when I was gone, took a shaky breath and said, "It's complicated." I clenched my fists. "You told everyone I was dead." Mark didn't answer. My mom started crying again. "Why?" I asked. He opened his mouth, but before he could say a word, Dad said something that made my stomach twist. "Mark told us you overdosed." The air went out of the room. I swear my vision went blurry for a second. I had no idea how to respond to that. Everyone just stared at me, waiting for me to explain why I wasn't buried in the ground. And all I could think was, what kind of person tells the world their brother overdosed, just to get rid of him? I was about to find out. Mark and I were never close, but we weren't enemies either, at least not until a few years ago. Growing up in Dayton, Ohio, he was the golden kid. Straight A's, quarterback, teacher's favorite, all that crap. I was the quieter one. Did my own thing, never caused trouble, just didn't shine like he did. But once we became adults, everything flipped. Dad owned a small contracting company, James and Sons Construction. When Dad got older, I started running most of the jobs and clients liked me. I showed up early, did the work, treated people fair. Mark worked the business side, supposedly handling finances. But I started noticing things that didn't add up. Invoices that were paid but never deposited. Equipment bought twice. Checks missing. I brought it up once and he blew up at me. Said I didn't understand how business worked. I dropped it for Dad's sake. But over the next year, money kept disappearing. I didn't say anything, but I knew. Mark was skimming. When I finally confronted him last Christmas, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "If you tell Dad, you'll regret it." He didn't yell. He just said it like a fact. I remember thinking, what the hell does that mean? But before I could figure it out, I got offered a 3-month field job in Alaska. A chance to make some real money doing logistics work for a remote site. Paid well and gave me space from all the drama. Before I left, I stopped by Dad's place. He looked tired but happy. Told me Mark had been keeping things running smoothly. I didn't have the heart to tell him the truth. So I went. No service, no calls. Just long days and freezing nights. It was the kind of job where your phone might as well be a brick. When I finally came back in late September, I texted Mark first. Back in Ohio. Can't wait to see Dad. No reply. I figured he was busy. But then I texted Mom. Same thing. Silence. I checked Facebook, and my heart nearly stopped. There were posts from my cousins, old friends, even my ex. Rest in peace, Tyler. You'll be missed, man. Gone too soon. My face was on candlelight posts. People were sharing old photos like I died suddenly. And right there, pinned at the top of my brother's profile, was a post from him. We lost my brother Tyler this week. Please respect our privacy while we grieve. I loved him, even when he didn't love himself. That last line, even when he didn't love himself, was like a knife. He told everyone I overdosed. I sat there in my car, staring at the screen, feeling this weird mix of panic and disbelief. I tried calling everyone, Mom, Dad, friends. No one answered. Not one person. I didn't know what to do, so I drove straight to my parents' house. But when I pulled up, there was a for sale sign in the yard. That's when I really started to panic. I went to my aunt's house next. She opened the door, saw me, and screamed. Not in excitement, in terror. She actually backed away like I was some hallucination. Took me 5 minutes to convince her I was real. That's when she told me about the memorial they were having that weekend. For Dad's birthday. Apparently Mark said I would have wanted it that way. So yeah, I went. And that's how I ended up walking into my own fake funeral party, while my brother was still giving a speech about how I lost my battle. But the craziest part? That wasn't even the worst thing he did. After that scene at the restaurant, things went downhill fast. My dad kept demanding answers. My mom couldn't stop crying, and Mark just stood there frozen like he wanted to disappear. The rest of the guests were whispering, some filming, some leaving. Felt like the whole world tilted sideways. When Dad finally shouted, "Explain yourself, Mark!" The room went silent. Mark rubbed his face and said, "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Go this far. I repeated. You told people I was dead. He looked at me with this pathetic mix of guilt and arrogance. You weren't answering. Nobody could reach you. I thought, don't even try that. I cut him off. You didn't think I was dead. You made it up. And then, quietly, almost under his breath, he said, "You wouldn't understand." Dad slammed his fist on the table so hard a glass broke. Understand what, Mark? He didn't answer right away. He just said, "I'll explain later." But Dad wasn't having it. He demanded everyone leave. The guests shuffled out awkwardly, whispering, some glancing back at me like they weren't sure if I was really alive. Within 15 minutes, it was just us four, me, Dad, Mom, and Mark, standing in that half-decorated restaurant surrounded by balloons and a ruined cake. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Start talking, he said. Mark sighed. It's complicated. I just didn't know how to tell people what happened. Mom whispered, "You said he overdosed." Mark nodded like he was admitting to stealing a candy bar, not fabricating someone's death. "I thought that was the story that made sense," he muttered. "You disappeared. No one heard from you. You had that rough year before you left." Rough year meaning what? I snapped. That I broke up with a girl? That I had bills? That's life, Mark. He didn't respond. He just stared at the floor. Then Dad said something I didn't expect. "The police report, Mark. You showed me paperwork." That's when I realized how deep this lie went. Mark had forged official papers. He must have filed something, faked something, enough to convince not just our parents but the police that I'd died. I turned to him. "You actually filed a death report?" He hesitated. "It wasn't official, just a missing person report. I changed it later, made it look like..." He stopped talking. That's when I stepped forward, grabbed him by the collar and said, "You made it look like what, Mark?" "Like you overdosed and were cremated," he whispered. My mom screamed. Dad had to pull me off him before I threw a punch. I was shaking, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. All I could think was why. Why go through all that trouble just to erase me? And then Dad said, voice low and shaking, you emptied his savings account, didn't you? Mark froze. I didn't even know about that. But Dad must have checked something. He looked like the realization had just hit him too. And the way Mark didn't deny it, that silence was louder than any confession. I felt sick. Did you take my money too? I asked. He finally looked up at me, eyes cold now instead of guilty. You weren't using it. That's when it clicked. He didn't just want me gone. He wanted everything that came with me. My part of the business. My money. My share of Dad's trust fund. I thought the worst part was that he'd told everyone I was dead. But I was wrong. That was just step one. When Dad heard that Mark took my money, something in him broke. He sat down at one of the empty tables and just stared at the floor. The man who used to throw his weight around job sites like a tank suddenly looked hollow. Mom was crying quietly, her hands trembling in her lap. I wanted to tear Mark apart, but I held back. For Dad's sake. He finally said, in this low, tired voice, how much, Mark? Mark rubbed his temples. It's not like that. I was just borrowing. How much? Mark hesitated, then said, 42,000. The number hit me like a punch. That was everything I'd saved. Every overtime hour. Every job site bonus. He drained it all. I felt my throat tighten. You stole 42 grand and told people I was dead? He glared at me like I was the problem. You left, Tyler. You didn't answer for months. Dad was sick. I had to keep the business running. I didn't know if you were coming back. That doesn't justify anything, I said. You could have just called the damn job site. He gave a little smirk. You didn't exactly leave a forwarding address. And that's when Dad snapped. He stood up, pointed straight at Mark, and shouted, you forged my son's death certificate. You told everyone he overdosed. You ruined your own family. You selfish bastard. For a second, I thought Mark might finally break down. Instead, he straightened his shoulders and said, you don't understand, Dad. I had to. You were ready to hand the business over to him. The air froze. What? I asked. Mark's face twisted with anger. You don't know, do you? Dad was going to retire this year. He already changed the paperwork. You were going to be primary owner of James and Sons. Me? I was supposed to take a back seat. The screw-up who just does accounting. Dad didn't deny it. I looked at him, stunned. You were giving me the company? He nodded slowly. You earned it. You worked the jobs. Mark just pushed numbers around. Mark laughed, bitter and sharp. Yeah, well, guess what? The bank didn't care who earned it. They just cared who had the signature on file. He said it like it was a punchline, and I realized what he'd done. He'd forged Dad's signature, too. Mark, I said, my voice shaking, Did you sell the company? He didn't answer. Dad stepped forward. Tell me right now, son. Mark finally said, I had to. I was drowning in debt. You don't understand. You sold the company that your father and brother built. I interrupted. And you told everyone I was dead, so I couldn't stop you. He didn't deny it. He just said, it's not that simple. Dad sat back down, looking like he might be sick. Mom kept whispering, no, 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 under her breath. I felt my whole life collapse in that moment. Everything I'd worked for, the family business, the reputation, the savings, gone. My own brother had destroyed it all, and then erased me from existence to cover his tracks. But then he said something that made it even worse. Something that changed everything. He looked right at me, eyes cold, and said, you think I wanted to? You should be thanking me. If you'd come home when I filed that report, you'd be in jail. I froze. What the hell are you talking about? I asked. He smirked. You'll find out soon enough. And that's when I realized he hadn't just stolen my money. He'd set me up for something. Something way bigger. After that night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed at a motel outside Dayton because I couldn't stand being in that house with him one more second. I kept replaying everything in my head. The slideshow, the fake eulogy, his face when I walked in. And that last thing he said, if you'd come home when I filed that report, you'd be in jail. What the hell did that mean? I didn't know, But I was done reacting. Now it was my turn to act. The next morning, I went to the county records office and asked for business filings under James and Sons Construction. The clerk looked confused, said the business had been legally dissolved in August and merged with a new entity, MJ Renovations LLC. I knew that name immediately. MJ. Mark James. He'd sold our company to himself. But it got worse. He used Dad's signature on the sale documents and my name on the liability forms. According to public record, I had been responsible for over $80,000 in business fines and unpaid vendor fees. Basically, he'd cooked the books, emptied the accounts, and left my name holding the bag. If I hadn't been dead, there would have been lawsuits, maybe even jail. That's when I realized his plan wasn't just about greed. It was about self-preservation. He buried me so I couldn't expose him, and I was done letting him get away with it. So I started digging. First stop, the bank. I told the branch manager I was Tyler James and needed information on fraudulent withdrawals from my old account. She looked up my name and literally paled. "Sir, your account was closed upon confirmation of your death." "Yeah," I said. "About that." Turns out Mark had submitted a death certificate, fake of course, and transferred everything to estate of Tyler James, which he had full executor rights over. He even left a note in the system that said, "Client deceased due to overdose. Executor, Mark James, brother." He forged all of it. That was my breaking point. I went straight to a friend of mine from the Alaska job, a guy named Cooper who used to work in private security. He helped me contact a lawyer and an investigator who specialized in business fraud. We didn't have much money, but they agreed to dig on contingency if I could prove fraud. Over the next few weeks, we gathered everything. Screenshots, records, email trails, the fake posts, the forged documents, the new LLC filings, even an email from Mark to a supplier where he pretended to be me. Piece by piece, we built a timeline of how he'd killed me. Not literally, but on paper and stolen my life. The lawyer told me, "You've got enough here to bury him, legally at least." But I didn't just want legal revenge. I wanted him to feel it. So I waited, because I knew Mark was planning a grand reopening for MJ Renovations. New branding, new contracts, new clients, big event, press, ribbon cutting, the whole show. And I planned to walk right into that one too. But not empty-handed this time. When that day came, he wouldn't just lose his company. He'd lose everything he ever stole from me, including the last thing he thought was safe, his reputation. The day of the MJ Renovations grand reopening was ridiculous. Mark had rented out a banquet hall near downtown, printed glossy flyers, invited local contractors, the bank rep who'd signed off on his merger, and half our old clients. He'd even paid for a local paper to send a photographer. It smelled like success in a way that made my stomach roil. Fake plants, fake smiles, a ribbon that said, "New Beginnings." I walked in with Cooper and the investigator, Lisa, and for the first 20 minutes we just watched. Mark was on stage in front of a banner, telling a story about humble beginnings while sipping some champagne like he'd earned it. People laughed. People clapped. I could see the old clients warming up to him again. He looked untouchable. That's when Lisa tapped my arm and nodded toward the back table where the bank rep was signing something with Mark. She'd found the account transfers, paper trails linking the life insurance payout, the estate transfers, the bank account that suddenly had an extra $100,000 in it the month after I died. Life insurance. I hadn't even known we had a policy big enough to do this. But Mark had taken one out months before I left for Alaska. He listed himself as beneficiary, forged a note that looked like I'd consented, then submitted a claim when he announced my death. With that payout, he paid off dozens of creditors, laundered the rest into MJ Renovations, and then cooked the books so that my name carried the fines and liabilities. When Lisa told me, the world went a little black around the edges. Insurance fraud, bank fraud, forgery, this was bigger than petty theft. This was organized theft. We moved. Cooper distracted the crowd by accidentally knocking over a stack of brochures near the snack table. People looked. Security went to him. While they were busy, Lisa walked straight up to the stage, pulled the mic out of Mark's hand and said, clear and loud, before you cut the ribbon, there's something the guests should know. A hush fell. Mark froze, smirk curdling into real fear. He mouthed, what are you doing? Like a kid caught cheating. Lisa didn't wait. She talked fast, but calm. There's evidence that MJ Renovations started using funds from a life insurance payout meant for the James family estate. A payout secured by fraudulent documents. She pointed at him. And we can prove the beneficiary was changed by Mark James. You could see the life drain from him. He tried to interrupt, but the banker on stage cleared his throat and slid his chair back like he was distancing himself from a hot stove. I pulled out my phone and started playing audio clips we'd collected. Voicemails Mark had left me. Texts where he'd threatened me after I threatened to expose him. And worst of all, a recorded conversation where he casually told a supplier, Tyler's out of the picture. I did what I had to do. The crowd shifted. Faces that had been laughing were suddenly tight. A few people began to film. Mark's smile dropped. He was sweating. And then came the twist that nobody expected, not even me. As people stared, a woman from the front row stood up. It was Mrs. Callahan, Dad's old secretary and practically the family linchpin. She'd been the one who used to hand me Christmas cookies at the office parties. Everyone loved her. She walked to the mic, and her voice, soft at first, cut the room like glass. I signed those papers, she said, because Mark told me it would save the family. He said Tyler had been a danger to them. He told me to sign as a witness. Everyone turned to Mark. He tried to say something, she's lying, but her next sentence made the room tilt again. He told me if I didn't sign, he'd tell my husband that I'd been stealing petty cash for years. He blackmailed me. Blackmail. Insurance scams. Forged wills. The list kept getting longer. And with every new detail, another face in the crowd went from supportive to disgusted. That's when I realized the real scale of it. This wasn't just Mark acting alone to get money. He'd been building a safety net, one made of threats and faked paperwork, wrapping it around him until nothing could touch him. He'd bought silence. He'd bought signatures. He'd bought the illusion of legitimacy. And for a moment, with the hall silent and Mark's bravado gone, it felt like the whole house of cards might finally collapse. But I still hadn't shown my hand fully. I still had one more play left. After the chaos in that banquet hall, the cops showed up. They questioned people, took statements, and eventually escorted Mark out the side door while the crowd stared. Dad didn't even look at him. Mom was shaking so badly I had to hold her up. Felt like the end of something. But later that night, sitting in my car outside the police station, the investigator, Lisa, said quietly, "You still don't know why he did all this, do you?" I thought I did. Money, jealousy, control. But she gave me this look that said there was more. She handed me a folder. We got a copy of his credit report and insurance applications. There's a pattern here you need to see. The documents were full of numbers, addresses, signatures. At first, it looked like normal financial garbage. But then I noticed something strange. He'd taken out 2 life insurance policies under my name, one through the family business, and another personal one through a company I'd never heard of. That second one had a beneficiary that wasn't him. It was Dad. Lisa explained it slowly. He set up that second policy to make it look like you took it out yourself. Then he filed the claim using forged medical records showing a history of drug dependency. He wanted your death to look real enough to trigger both payouts. One for himself, one for your father. I stared at her. Why would he want Dad to get one? She hesitated. Because it wasn't about helping your dad. It was about covering his tracks. Once the money hit your father's account, Mark was going to claim you had left it in your will to him as executor. He was setting it up so the transfer looked legitimate when he moved the money into MJ Renovations. So he needed Dad to receive it first. Lisa nodded. Exactly. But that's not the worst part. She flipped another page. There were emails, ones we hadn't seen before, between Mark and a woman named Rachel Barnes. She was an insurance adjuster, married, 2 kids. The emails were flirty at first, then desperate. "If you push this through before the review period, I'll make it worth your time," I told you this would be clean. His family's a mess anyway. You promised you wouldn't use my name, Mark. It hit me then he hadn't just faked my death. He'd bribed someone inside the insurance company to push it through fast enough that no one checked the coroner records. He was sleeping with her. And when she started to panic, he blackmailed her too. Lisa looked at me, face grim. He's been doing this for years. Different identities. Small policies. Fake beneficiaries. He'd get people to sign as witnesses, file phony claims on relatives who'd already died, and cash out before audits. You were just the biggest one. I felt my stomach drop. He's a serial fraud. He's worse, she said. He's addicted to it. He gets off on it. You were the one person who could ruin him, so he erased you. And that's when it really sank in. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't desperation. It was something colder. He enjoyed it. Every forged signature. Every fake tear he shed over my death. Every dollar he stole. He didn't do it because he needed to. He did it because it gave him power to play God with people's lives. He'd even bragged to that woman in one of the messages. You ever fake something so good that people cry over it? It's like controlling the weather. That line stuck with me. It still does. Because that's what he'd done. He made it rain grief. And he stood under the umbrella, smiling. And I knew then, legal justice wouldn't be enough. He had to feel what it was like to lose control completely. To feel erased. After the cops hauled him off, I could have left everything to the courts. But I knew guys like Mark, he'd talk, twist, manipulate, cry in the right places. He'd probably get probation, maybe some restitution. Then he'd start over somewhere else, same tricks, new victims. So I made sure that didn't happen. Lisa told me the DA was already building a case for fraud, forgery, and identity theft. But the problem was, they didn't have enough personal victims willing to come forward. Everyone he'd blackmailed was terrified of losing their jobs, families, reputations. So I went to each one myself. I met Mrs. Callahan first, at a diner near the highway. She couldn't even look at me when I sat down. Said she still saw that slideshow every time she closed her eyes. I told her straight up, you didn't kill me. He did. And if you want to make it right, help me finish this. She did. One by one, I talked to the others. A supplier he'd bullied. A contractor he'd threatened with fake invoices. Even Rachel, the insurance woman, eventually called me, crying, saying she wanted to tell the truth if I promised not to expose her to her kids. Within a month, we had sworn statements from 6 people. That was enough to blow the case wide open. But the best part wasn't what happened in court. It was what happened before it. The DA's office held a press conference. Small, local, but public enough to sting. They announced the charges, listed the victims, the fraudulent companies, the amount stolen, over $380,000 in total. They said the investigation started because the supposed victim, Tyler James, wasn't as dead as people thought. That line made the evening news. Every clip, every headline, every photo of him in handcuffs, he hated it. He'd spent his whole life trying to control how people saw him. Now he was just a headline about a brother who faked his sibling's death for money. When I visited Dad the next day, he was sitting in his recliner staring at the TV. He didn't say much. Just, you really came back from the dead, huh? I said, guess so. He nodded once, eyes still on the screen. Good. Make it count. And I did. At the sentencing, I sat in the front row. He shuffled in wearing that orange jumpsuit, eyes flicking to me just once before looking away. The judge listed everything: wire fraud, identity theft, falsifying documents, insurance fraud. 8 years. When they let him out, he turned and whispered something I'll never forget. You won't stay alive forever. I didn't answer. I just looked him dead in the eye until he turned away. Later that night, I went home, what was left of it. Dad had taken down the for sale sign. We sat outside drinking cheap beer while the sun went down. It was quiet for a long time. Then he said, you know, it's funny. He thought killing you on paper would make him feel powerful. But you walking back into that room took everything from him. I smiled a little. Yeah, guess I learned something from him after all. Because now, every time someone Googles Mark James, all they'll see is me. The brother he buried who came back and burned his name to ashes. And that's exactly how I wanted it. I didn't get my money back. I didn't get my company back. But I got something better. The truth out loud, where he can't touch it. And for a guy like him, that's worse than any prison.